Welcome to the Love Your Inner Athlete podcast, your go-to source for all things mental fitness in sports. Whether you're an athlete, coach, or parent, you will learn as you join us to dive into inspiring conversations with those who have worked to develop their mental fitness. You will hear from people who have put in the work as either an athlete, coach, or a parent. In each episode, we bring you discussions and expert insights on developing resilience, focus, and mindset. Discover the concepts of mental fitness and learn how to use it to create consistent, durable confidence in both sports and life. I'm your host, Hans Schulstad. Let's get started. So welcome everybody to Inner Athlete Podcast. We have with us today Ryan Humpal, who is a coach of multiple sports. He's a head coach at Amory High School football. Used to be the head coach in Luck, Wisconsin, where he won a state championship in 2019. And I was able to work with a couple of his teams in Luck and one of his teams in Amory, and he's joining us today. He's done a lot of work with us and uses a lot of our tools. And so I just wanted to sit down and have a chat with him about his insights as a coach of multiple sports, as a dad of young athletes, about how mental fitness can help athletes do their best to perform. So thanks for joining me today, Ryan.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So you've seen me present. I think the first time you really saw me present was at a USA Level 4 hockey clinic, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's correct. That was probably about 7 years ago.
Well, I bet it was even longer than that.
Longer than that? I can't remember. It's been a while. I know that.
Yeah, well, we're both old, so
I know. It kind of goes by quick.
It goes by quick, yeah. I mean, I've got a sophomore and you've got a BAM. So when you saw that presentation, what was it about the presentation that you saw that made you decide that that was something your athletes needed to hear?
A lot of it that I really enjoyed that first time I saw it was all the interactive stuff that is done through the presentation. Had other speakers in prior to bringing you in Luck, and it was more just talking about character ed, and there wasn't really hands-on for the kids, and there wasn't much you could take away as a coaching staff that you could keep implementing throughout a season and throughout an off season, I guess.
Okay. And then when I came in, and I think I presented to your entire athletic department, right, at Luck.
Yep. The first time.
Yeah. What kind of feedback did you get from the coaches and the athletes after we did that?
That the first time was a lot of mixed reviews, I guess you could say, where a lot of coaches are pretty apprehensive, which that's not out of the ordinary. I can't imagine. The athletes seem to be a little bit more apt to trying stuff that we talked about. I don't know if they fully knew what was going on at that point. And I think the group that you came to and talked in 19, they would have been freshmen the first time you came and talked to the whole athletic department.
Well, and that was all the athletes too in the school.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It was all the athletes. And then we kind of that in 19, I think was more focused just on all the football players, where they really dove in deep with them guys more.
Yeah. I remember you telling me that before the state championship game, you couldn't find some players. You want to tell people more about that?
Yeah. So we were loading the bus. I don't know. It was probably 2 hours at kickoff. Loading the bus from the hotel. And we were missing, 8. So we had 8 stars. We were missing 6 of them. And they're usually guys that, they know if they're 5 minutes early, they're late. So we're ready to leave and they are nowhere to be found. And we have to do room checks, and we find them knock on the door where 3 of our captains were in that evening or the night before. And one of our captains answers the door. He says, "Sorry, coach, we got 3 minutes left of visualization audio. We'll be down shortly." That same individual in the state title game ran for 432 and 5 touchdowns and had 14 tackles. So obviously he was in a pretty good mindset for 4 quarters that day.
So when you look back on that year, how do you think what we did with your team helped?
The biggest thing, and these guys still talk about it when I've asked them different questions for you and for myself as over the last couple of years.
Some of them are probably in their 20s now.
Yeah. Well, there's 3 of that team that are 2 are Division I baseball players, and one's a junior at St. John's football. They still use the stuff. But that year, what we really stressed was stay in the present, with a big thing that you've always talked about, focus on the controllables, where the previous year where we were state runner-up, us as a coaching staff and the players were not as good at that aspect of focusing on the controllables to allow you to get to the next play. I mean, we talked about it, but we didn't have the tools to actually implement it with the players as well.
Okay. So the previous year, you kind of got hooked into stuff that you couldn't control.
Yeah. And after that was one of the big things we talked about as a staff after after we kind of gave it away in the fourth the year before, 12-point lead in the fourth. And our big thing going into the offseason was, or we're not going to leave any rock unturned as to how we're going to win it the next year. And I think you were the first person I called in January when we were after our mid offseason meeting and made sure we weren't going to miss this piece of the brain training. The mental side of it was not going to be the reason why we lost the state title 2 years in a row. I can tell you that.
So do you feel like the things that your athletes learned, they could apply to multiple sports?
Yeah. I chatted with the two brothers that were on the team. They're both playing down south in small Division I baseball. And they both still have the audio downloaded to their phones that if they're in a bad state of mind in baseball, they'll pull that back off the audio and use it.
Oh, wow. Even this much later, huh?
Yeah,
well,
so
that's cool. I'm glad to hear that. That's fun.
I don't know how much either of those programs use, how much mental fitness they actually do on a daily, or if they even talk about it. I would assume they have talked a little bit about it, but they haven't mentioned anything when we've chatted on it.
Yeah. So can you say more about why you decided to bring me into Amory a couple of years ago?
My biggest thing was I was an all new coaching staff. I worked with a couple of guys in my previous stint in Amory, which would have been 15 years ago, 16 years ago, where I knew that if it was just me telling the rest of my coaching staff that, hey, we need to do this kind of stuff and we need to actually train athletes' brains on how to actually wire or how to actually fire correctly in stressful situations, they'd all look at me like I was filling them full of a bunch of BS. And it's helped, but it's still kind of, I've been thinking a lot about this offseason that it emulates what we did at Luck the first time around very, very well, where they got, buy-in with coaches and athletes the last 3 years has been pretty apprehensive. It's the first time I've ever heard it. The first time you hear something like this, I think that's human nature to be apprehensive about it.
It's something different and new.
Yeah. And, people don't like change, and it's kind of a change. And, I have some guys on my staff that they've coached a lot of football and been around football for quite a few years, and they've never dealt with it, never had to deal with it, never talked about it. I think we're getting better as a staff, as a full staff at it as years, last couple of years. This last year was better than the previous two. And it helped that some of the players were starting to see some results on the field compared to the first year, where walked into not a very good situation, we'll say, the first year.
So is there something that you've learned from me that has changed the way you coach, or something that you do as a coach that you hadn't done before?
One real big thing, one thing I took away from, I think it was, I can't remember if it was one of our times that we just chatted or if it was the time that you came into Luck the second time, where you mentioned too, I think it was the second time in Luck where we were meeting with all the coaches, and you mentioned to us that, hey, you got to shift the thought of this is something we should do into this is something you need to do to get your athletes to perform at a high level. And I've kind of used that. It's not an easy thing to, especially if you don't have a full coach buy-in on your whole staff. It's not an easy thing to say, hey guys, we're going to allocate 10 minutes a day. Which we do right now, 10 minutes a day, especially through our first 2 weeks during our training camp in August, that, hey, we're going to train our brains for 10 minutes a day. It's tough for coaches that haven't heard. And we had 7 guys on staff, and I think 2 of the other guys were actually at that meeting we had.
So you've had a lot of turnover.
Yeah. We've had a little bit of turnover where it's tough to get everybody on the same page with it.
So would you say that, like, when you were playing sports in high school, how much time detailed coaching did you get on how to manage your mind?
0.
Yep. How do you think things would have been different for you if you had something like that growing up?
Well, it would have helped me immensely. I kind of look at myself as, when we'll use golfing as an example, average golfer in high school. I was above average golfer in high school and right after, but the mental aspect of the game was absolutely atrocious. I could go birdie, 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 and then all of a sudden one bogey and I'm going to shoot a 42, where I had a big time snowball effect, and especially in golf. But like in the hockey world, for me, hockey was different, where you just go hard and you kind of work your way out of it. That's kind of how it did for me. But would it have helped? Heck yeah. There's a lot of busted sticks over dashers over the years that probably wouldn't have happened. But
Those were wooden sticks, weren't they? You're that old?
we had
Or did you have aluminum?
I was right on the cusp of the graphite shafts. That cost $100 and everybody freaked out because they're $100 and not a $25 piece of wood. But
and now they're like $350.
Yeah. Now you can't even get a little kid at one for $100.
Right.
Yeah. It would have definitely helped.
Well, speaking of that, like the game has changed in that way. You've been coaching for probably at least 10 years, right?
Yeah. This last football season was my 19th season.
Okay. So, we're really old then.
Yeah. We're getting
That's almost as long as Jenny and I have been married. But so my question for you is, have you seen a change in athletes that requires coaches to adapt to a more mentally fit approach?
Yes. The hard thing is, I'll use the old myth that, hey, kids have to be mentally, that kid's not mentally tough. I mean, when I was an athlete, that's what coaches would talk about. And I remember that as being, my first 6-7 years coaching is, well, that kid doesn't, he's not mentally tough. We can't use him, or he's not, he's never going to play for us. Where now, for myself anyways, the perspective of no kid's mentally tough coming into the program where, hey, we have to train them to be better at what they can do on the mental side of things. It's an interesting way to look at it where, do I think that athletes have changed immensely? No. I just think we always, as a coaching staff 15 years ago, was either, hey, that kid has it or he doesn't. And we didn't do anything about it. Where we were kind of hindering especially the really highly skilled athletes, we could have got a lot more out of them, if we'd used some of these tools back 15, 20 years ago, where, what we're using now. I kind of use, looking back at these first 3 years in Amory, it has definitely helped some athletes where, we 2 seasons ago, we had the largest comeback in state history, down 32 points with 16 minutes left and somehow won. Without training the brain, in my opinion, there's a 0% chance that's going to happen. Where our guys just, they got into that performance zone for 16 minutes of a football game and somehow decided to pull it out.
Yeah, that was a crazy game.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
I bet.
Hopefully I'm never on the other side of it. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Would you say that any of the stuff you've learned from me, I don't know, are you still reffing? Would it help you do you think it'd help you as a referee?
Yeah, it would definitely help as a ref. So the first few times that I would have heard you, and when you met with us and locked them 2 times, my last year reffing was 19. So there were 6-7 years where I knew some of the tools with reffing. The thing that I didn't use as much then as I use now is the breathing techniques after, which would definitely help as an official. Because there's times where you feel like you want to just lash out at somebody, but you can't. On the ice as an official, if you had the breathing techniques to be able to go through and slow the heart rate down and get yourself back into the present, it would help. It would definitely help.
Yeah, well, and I bet being a referee, you saw lots of kids that could probably use my help.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's probably a couple we talked about over the years, I'd imagine.
Yeah, that's probably true.
And there's might be a couple that you actually work with, because there's quite a few in the league and Division I that I officiated.
Oh, sure. So why do you think what I share is so important for coaches and athletes?
The big thing kind of goes back to that myth. That's why I think it's that, and I have a couple guys on staff right now that guy's not mentally tough. I don't know if he's ever going to hack it. Where as a coach, it's our job to get every ounce of possible talent out of kids, especially at the varsity level, where, like I mentioned earlier, is that if we don't do this, the likelihood of getting an ounce of talent out of a kid is not as high. Could it happen? Still, sure. There's been plenty of coaches over the years that have got a ton of talent out of guys, probably without using any brain training or not knowing that they're, that they're doing it. But I think that's one huge thing that why it has to be used. And I have this jotted down here is my goal, through using it is to get kids to realize they don't need to be afraid to make mistakes, because it's really not that big of a deal. Hey, there's, next play is coming. Stay in the present. Good things happen. Bad things happen.
Yeah. Tell me, I sometimes think, I've worked with lots of high school coaches, and I sometimes think, I know you, so this might be true. You got to be a little bit crazy to be a high school coach in this day and age.
Yeah.
Because there's so much that goes with it. So why do you coach?
My biggest reason why I coach is to make impacts on student athletes, to try to help them become a better human, which it kind of sounds stupid. That's kind of the cliche of, hey, why do you coach? But coaching got me into my career that into education, where I coached
Uh-huh.
for 5 years before I was an educator, where it made me realize that, yeah, I do really enjoy making an impact on student athletes between, from the ages of whatever till they graduate. And it's fun. I mean, I really, really highly enjoy it, where it kind of always been a pretty high competitor, and it allows me to kind of compete at a different level, I guess.
So, kind of flipping over to another area, would you say some of the stuff that you've learned from, the mental fitness concepts and the things I've presented, have you used them in your life as a parent or in other aspects of life?
Yeah, I try to use them as a parent. Like I mentioned, the breathing cards, the idea of actually doing controlled breathing. Being a parent of teenagers, you know how it is. Sometimes they drive you nuts a little bit. And you gotta,
Yeah, and
before you
teenage
let it
boys
rip,
for sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
especially hockey players. Or
yeah,
you gotta sometimes choose your words wisely as to when you're having a confrontation instead of to diffuse it versus compound it, I guess.
Have you ever felt like you still couldn't coach kids hard, even though you know this?
No, I'll use one of my things that came back in my end of the year evaluation. The question was, does your coach expect you to compete at a high level at all times on the game field and practice field?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was out of 5, and I received a 4.92 out of like 42 guys that took the evaluation. Has my philosophy on coaching a kid hard changed? Yes. I used to be loud and screaming and, all that high energy. It might be
Mm-hmm.
partially because I've coached for 20 years now and, getting older, I don't have as much energy as I did right when I started. But there's many ways to coach athletes hard using these tools versus just standing and screaming at a kid.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Like, there's been numerous times, either at Luck or other times where that we're around each other, we've had conversations about kids and maybe like how to handle things. Say a little bit about how some of those conversations have gone or how they've helped or not helped you.
I'll use my son for an example. That was probably the last conversation we had last summer when he was struggling a little bit. Struggling a little bit in baseball where he would compound things. And one big thing that I've tried since we've had this conversation is just especially reminding him how much we enjoy watching him play the game, no matter if it's football or hockey or baseball. Instead of having this, hey, you should have did this, you should have did that type of conversation that I probably have had many times with him. And, this fall during football, I tried to use that a lot more. That kind of same adage of, hey guys, I'm really enjoying, where we're going to, but we got to try this. Where you kind of start with that positive, and then you can get to the message a little better once you have your audience using that positive.
Okay. So when you have like coaches that are apprehensive or parents or players, because I get that now and then, what would you tell them about why it's worth taking the risk?
So with my coaching staff, what I've used many times is that example of those players from that 19 team about how they heard it twice. They bought in heavily after they met with you for the second time. And they put a pretty good product on the field for 13 straight weeks. So that's with my coaches. That's why I use my guys. It works. These guys were nuts about it. They can probably literally still almost go word for word through your visualization audio. That group of, that group of seniors that had it for 2 years in a row up there. And then with athletes, and they kind of start joking about it, where we've used the same audio now, I think for probably the 3 years that I've been in Amory, it's relatively the same audio. They know what's coming next. And there's guys that can, same type of thing where they can kind of talk through the whole thing, which they kind of laugh about. I'm like, guys, it's working. I'm like, if you can repeat it, that means you're buying in and it's working. Then I've had a few, I had 2 this last fall, 2 of the younger kids, highly talented, both played substantial varsity minutes, both had a pretty successful season. And one visualization night, they were kind of dinking around, so they weren't really into it at all. It was week 1 or week 2. And I just walked by him and said to both of them, I said, guys, both of you are way too good athletes to not take this stuff seriously. Like, it's going to help you. You have to trust me. And then after that, they kind of bought in. Right now, I'm using breathing technique cards with the Bantams. And we do them 1 day a week through dry land just because I'm not, I'm a little apprehensive with them. It's 13 and 14-year-olds that who knows what you're going to get out of them. And they ask every week, hey, what night we got breathing techniques?
Oh yeah. So you're using the mental fitness cards you bought for me.
Yep, that 29-day or 30-day 30 pack cards, whatever it is.
There's an updated version that's actually in a book form that's now 52.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they work. We just did the one the other night. Yeah, so it's only our third week of doing it because we haven't had everybody there. I mean, there's been so many kids sick and gone. We did the where you tense all your muscle groups all the way up and down the body, and that one had good reviews. They're like, yeah, that was pretty cool. Like, I didn't know I could tense my abs by themselves without moving anything else in my body.
So would you say those cards, you've used them like across multiple teams and scenarios?
Yeah. So the cards are what we use quite a bit. Like I was mentioned earlier, that first 2 weeks of football, we alternate. So we get through 5 cards in those first 2 weeks because we have 10 days of camp. Where them other days, then we either do mouse traps or do concentration grids, goal setting. Oh, and then looking at their trigger words.
So do you have them do like the mousetrap exercise where they got to disarm it with the guidance of another player?
We do a lot of it where they're blindfolded with the 2 minutes.
Either where they have to set it in like as many times as they can in 2 minutes, or like if you and I were partners, you're blindfolded and I have to tell you where to move your hand so you don't get hurt.
Yep. We do more like set it. How many times can you set it in 2 minutes?
Oh, yeah. Have we ever done the other one?
No.
Where you and I are partners and it's set, then you put your hand like this and I'm blindfolded. I put my hand like this. The mouse trap is down below and you tell me how to move my hand so I can disarm it with the fingers and I can't see it.
You kind of have to guide them. Hey, you got to go right. You got to go left, go straight down, that kind of stuff.
Right.
No, never done that one. We did when you were up to an aimer, you did the one where it's everybody in a circle.
Oh,
set them
yeah.
on top of each other.
And then kids love that one because they all go off. And the part that I love about that is like throwing stuff in there to make them go off, which drives them crazy.
Yep.
And there's been only one time where I've worked with a team where they actually neutralized me as a threat. And that was a Division I hockey team where 4 of them pinned me to the floor.
So they could get the whole ring taken care of.
Yes.
That's good thinking.
Yeah. Well, the high school athletes don't ever think about it that way.
No.
The college ones would for sure. Yeah. No, that's a great one. And that one's really good for like the importance of each trap is important, just like each game and practice is important. And no one practice or one game is more important than the other.
Yep.
You got to execute the same either way. The other thing that I was going to ask you about was if you had the opportunity, if you were the athletic director, wherever you were, Amory or wherever else, would you be willing or would you hire me to do a keynote to your athletic department and why?
Yeah. I mean, obviously I have before, so the answer is pretty easy for me. I mean, and the big thing is to give coaches tools and give athletes tools to get them to the next level, not only individually, but as a team. And I've kind of thought about this pretty extensively now since what I was going to do in Luck, where I feel it'd be every 3 years where you come. So every athlete almost hears you twice, so when you start, you have you in as a freshman and then you're going into your senior athletic career, that you hear the same message or a little bit different version of the message. What I've noticed is seniors, you can get a heck of a lot more buy-in out of a 17 or 18-year-old than you can have a 14 or 15-year-old.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, it's vital. It was actually one thing I was going to talk to you about, if lining up a date for this summer.
For this summer?
Yeah.
Do you want to do it with the just the football team or the entire athletic?
That's when I got to talk to the athletic director. I would love to do it with the whole athletic department because our 8th grade group coming in right now they're both guys and girls. There's a lot of talent. It'd be kind of fun to see what they could do. The whole athletic department can do over the next 4 years.
Yeah.
With them. We'd have some programs pretty apprehensive even to encourage kids to show up on a random day in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, no, I get that.
And I know the football guys will show up because they'll have no choice.
So, yeah, because you make it mandatory.
Yeah. It'd be probably part of one of our contact days.
Yeah. Didn't we do it like, was it the last time I was in Amory? Wasn't it an all day thing?
Yeah.
Because I think I remember having lunch with you in between.
Yep. I mean, how do I get other coaches? Well, I mean, so here's the one nice thing. Matt got hired as the head baseball coach yesterday.
Oh, okay. So that's cool.
Baseball have buy-in, and they've done some. I mean, they have always done concentration grids. I know, and he's been part of the program. But if your head coach isn't if your head coach isn't the one selling the material, it doesn't go as well, I don't think.
No, well, and one thing that I have never been concerned about with your teams and your program is buy-in from you. And I wouldn't have any concern about that with Matt either, because you both get how important it is. And even the stuff way back like 10 years ago with DJ and all that stuff, like that's the other thing I think about, those conversations about that. And how I remember your brother and maybe even you talking about, shoot, I wish we would have had you come in before that. Maybe that would have changed something.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't get into coulda, woulda, shoulda in that scenario, but that's the other reason that, I do what I do is the same reason that you do, is to give kids an opportunity to get some material that's not talked about. And don't you think that the apprehension is more about stigma than anything else?
Yeah. Cause I think a lot of kids are, I'm too cool for this stuff. I don't need to train my brain. This stuff's all just bogus material and, brainwashing material. I've heard many comments on that. I'm sure you've heard a lot of the same from parents and athletes.
That feeds into that myth of you're wasting your time with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that if you need help with it, you're psycho or crazy or soft.
Yeah. I've had a couple of coaches, well, our kids are just soft. No, they have no idea what they're supposed to do in certain situations in life.
Well, yeah. And why? I was actually talking with Mike Gibbons earlier this week about, he used to coach at Bemidji and St. Cloud State. Why does he think coaches don't teach it? Why do you think coaches don't teach it?
They're scared. They don't understand why. Yeah, I think I'm in a pretty good situation for myself to, not fully understand it, but have a pretty good grasp of it with my biology background, where you got a lot of guys that are just, hey, you're coaching and you're a FIAD teacher, or you're coaching and you're a English teacher, where your background doesn't include the physiology and anatomy portion of the brain that actually, it makes more sense to me. More like when you go through your presentations and I can actually picture what parts of the brain you're talking about, versus that's the first time someone's ever heard that word before.
Yeah.
The lobes in the different areas. But yeah, I think the big thing is they're scared and they don't know what to do if a kid, all of a sudden they unlock something. And we've talked about this many times. Like what happens if, you unlock this bad experience that this kid had that no one knew about, where, over the years now it's been like, well, okay, that's what it's for. It's to help this kid out, where obviously it's something he needs to have a conversation with or get some help on. A lot of coaches are pretty apprehensive to deal with that kind of stuff.
I've often wondered, you tell me what you think about this, do you think sometimes just talking about it and that it's normal, do you think that shifts people's perspective, and kids in particular?
I think it helps. I'll use this year's Bantam team at our first parents meeting. So it was the first week before practice started, early October. And I said, hey, by the way, we're going to do these breathing technique cards. Your son's brain is very important for us to try to mold and train, become more mentally fit. And I said, what I need from you is when they come home and start talking about it, all I need you to do is encourage to keep doing it. Like, I don't want you to say, I don't think this should be happening. I'm telling you, this needs to happen. From listening to the players, I don't think they've had any bad experiences from mom and dad, or, any statements from mom and dad, well, that stuff's stupid or whatever, as they want to know. And it's kind of translating to the ice. I mean, they're playing pretty well as of late.
So now, honestly, probably the best part, answer truthfully, the best part of my presentations are the jokes, right?
Sure.
The puns.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
If that's what you want me to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Your W reminds me when Jenny and I went to New York City for our anniversary. I had Jenny take a video at the M&M store, and they had like a whole batch of new, they looked like they were all 14. I'm sure they were in their early 20s. And I said, hey, I heard some people are going to get fired today. And they're like, really? For what? And I'm like, because you were throwing out the W's.
See, that's the kind of jokes you're going for, aren't you, in your presentations right there?
Well, yeah, it's also like, I don't know if you saw Mental Fitness Fridays recently. Why did Santa Claus go to therapy?
I didn't see that one. No.
He didn't believe in himself.
That's a pretty good one.
I do like that one.
That's a good dad joke.
Yeah, it is a great dad. You know what the most important thing is about a dad joke?
That's really not that funny.
No, it's apparent.
Yeah, here we go. You shouldn't think this was the bad question to end with. We'll be here all night.
Oh yeah, well I could go with dad jokes until have I ever told you how I got so good at that? So when I was growing up, my grandpa use puns all the time. And so all the men in my family are highly competitive, including me. So we would sit around the dinner table at Christmas, Thanksgiving, or whatever, right? And try to one up each other.
Just see who could have a better one than the next guy.
Right. Like, there would always be one about my grandpa would say, I'll pat you on the back if you pass me the butter. Then I won't smear you anymore.
Yeah.
And then it would get rolling and rolling and rolling. And I've just gotten really good at it, to be honest. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. Once you get going, I suppose. Yeah. What does Hobie and Jenny think of them all?
Well, Hobie said about the M&M one that I got a pity laugh. Jenny just ignores them. The girl Hobie is hanging out with thinks they're hilarious.
She's supposed
Hobie rolls his eyes.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Yeah, well, thanks for doing this. I mean, you are definitely a great advocate and display mental fitness in that you continue to do it even though you have people that are skeptical or apprehensive. And I think you do it because you think it's the right thing to do by kids. And I never would have guessed when I first met you that you could evolve in your thinking. And now,
Yeah, I hear you.
and you definitely have.
So that was 25 years ago, about
You're 45?
40.
Yeah, I didn't meet you that young. I came into the family in 2001 or 2. How old were you then?
That was 18.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You guys got married my first year at Eau Claire, I think. So that had been 2003. You guys got married in 2003?
Yeah, I used to joke that I got engaged and the Gophers won the national championship. And then I got married and they won the national championship. And that now I had to figure out another big event to make that happen again. But it hasn't happened since then. So
tell you what, any one of these Big Ten schools might win it this year.
There's a lot of parity in that league, though, or in all of college hockey. Everybody's beating each other.
There's like 15 teams that are really good.
Yes.
Which should make the tourney pretty fun to watch.
It should, if they all get in.
But yeah, that's like Michigan right now they'd be on the outside outlook, on the outside right now. They're like 13 in the nation. You'd have all them other at-large bids get in, or the other conference teams get in. And they're solid. I mean, I still can't.
They are.
I don't know how the Badgers, Minnesota, and them back to back.
Well, sometimes it's when you play them too.
Yeah. Well, and that's like for Michigan State when they played the Badgers, where you sweep Minnesota, you sweep Michigan, you get a bye weekend, then you got to go to Michigan State. And Michigan State's obviously a pretty good hockey club where if they weren't off that bye, I think it had been a different.
Well, yeah, but that's also another part of mental fitness is knowing how to handle success.
Yeah. Think about most of them Badger players. They haven't had success. They got more wins right now than they had last year. All last year.
Well, probably the last 2 years.
Yeah. Well, 2 years ago, they had 7 total, I think, 7 or 8. Last year, they got to at least 12, I think. So they're at 13 wins.
Yeah. Well, and you hear the old saying, you're never as good as you think you are, and you're never as bad as you think you are. And that a lot of times is what I see is that like kids think that now that I've had some success with this, that it's going to be easy the rest of the way I got it down. I don't need to keep working at it. Or they start to think that they're so good and they're so above it all that it's just going to happen. They're destined for it. And then someone shows up and plays them tough and they get freaked out.
They don't know what to do.
Will you agree? You see that across all sports, professional, and it doesn't matter, baseball, hockey, football.
I was going to say, I think the NFL is probably the most apparent for that, where that whole, the movie, Any Given Sunday, it's legit.
Yeah.
And you could have a 1-13 team beat a 13-1 team.
Right.
That should never happen.
Well, thanks for doing this, Ryan.
Yeah,
and I'll have my virtual assistant chop it up. The marketing people make it into stuff that are testimonials. The big part of it is I want to do more speaking to people and less direct service. And I'm well on my way to doing that, but it's, I'm building a third business now. So
yeah, keeps you busy.
Yeah. But I got a lot of fun and good stories that I can tell. And I don't even have to use stories from my practice to come up with crazy stuff. I've seen enough crazy stuff just watching my own kid play hockey. Last year, we had a parent want to challenge our Bantam goalie's brother to a fight for cheering for his brother making a save in a game.
Parents are crazy, aren't they?
17 years old. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, that is odd. You never know what you're going to see in a rink.
Oh, that's true. And I'm sure that was aided by a few beers too, that outburst. But
Right. You got to have them cocktails in between games, else you can't.
Yes.
You're not a hockey parent then. You're not a true
Right.
hockey parent then if you don't have a Bloody Mary bar in the back of your truck every Saturday.
All right. Well, thanks for doing this again. And we'll probably have you on again soon and look forward to coming out to work with you guys again in the next summer. Have a good night.
You too.